I just want to thank the guys for inviting me to speak here today. I'm very honoured to tell the truth, and I want to congratulate them on showing this initiative regarding our old ground. Now, they did say I had 10 minutes to speak, but I think that might be a bit difficult to squeeze 65 years of history into 10 minutes. So you might have to just bear with me. I'd also just say in advance, I've been very sick the last 3 days, so if I struggle a little bit at times, just bear with me, please. So as you may know, Shamrock Rovers became a Leinster Senior Club in 1921-22, and they got a ground out in Windy Harbour, which is just up the road here. That ground didn't work out for the club because the club was growing rapidly at that time. The ground was completely unsuitable. So when they were promoted into the League of Ireland the following season in 22-23, there were no grounds down around Ringsend or Irish Town or Sandymount. The IRFU had bought up a lot of the pitches that were down along Bath Avenue and London Bridge Road to develop the Lansdowne Road Stadium. So Rovers had to find the ground and had to find one quickly. So Milltown was a fairly rural area at the time. There was just a village up here. All the lands going all the way back up to the Clonskeagh Road were basically farmlands and fields, if you can just imagine that. And it was a long way for Rovers to have to come out from Ringsend out to here. But they had to do it. There was no other way. If they wanted to play in the League of Ireland, they had to do it. Now they got a little bit of luck because along the Milltown Road at that time there was loads of pitches. There was Gaelic clubs, soccer clubs, rugby clubs and a cricket club even playing along that road. But from 1860 on, the Jesuits bought up most of that land, and that's where they built the Milltown Park development. And there was one landowner by the name of Mary Ann O'Neill who owned Elm House estate. And that house is still down there. It's right beside the statue. If you're coming from this direction down, it's the last house. So that was Mary Ann O'Neill's house with her husband Matthew. And Rovers had a little bit of luck because we had a committee member by the name of Mikey Dunn. And Mary Ann O'Neill was actually his aunt. Now, some GAA historians will say that there was a very famous GAA club by the name of Milltown Emmets playing on that pitch at the time. But you might have guessed that Shamrock Rovers ousted them. So I'll just explain here on the photograph, if you can see it. This is obviously the Milltown Road heading down to Clonskeagh. This is heading back up to the Dropping Well. The X there is the Elm House, the Elm Hall. That's where Mary Ann O'Neill lived. This, as you know, is Glenmalure Park. This photograph, I think, comes from around the 1960s. This pitch up here now, it's marked X, so this is an interesting one because I was years studying Rovers history and I did not know that we actually played at 2 different pitches in Milltown. So hence the 1922 and then the 1926, which we're talking about here today. So for 4 years we played in that pitch there at the back. So we had Rovers signed a 1-year lease with Mary Ann O'Neill for that pitch at the time in September 1923. And I had often wondered why it was only a 1-year lease, and I kind of gathered that maybe it was because she was selling that land to the Jesuits, and that is exactly what actually happened. So Rovers went into that pitch there. You used to have to walk up this way, and how I found that out was speaking to Billy Bean. If anybody wants to Google him, if you don't know Billy Bean, a very, very famous personality in Irish football. His family were rooted in Rovers history. He was a goalkeeper himself for Rovers. He said to me one day when I was researching for the Hoops book, he said, you know that they didn't always play in that pitch that was Glenmalure Park. And that was the first time I actually found that out. That took me totally completely by surprise. So that was the pitch, as I say. If you want to move on to the next one there. This was the lease that was signed. So this lease was signed in 1926. So what happened was, having played in that ground, that first pitch, it was totally, completely unsuitable. And if anybody's familiar with Gonzaga College, you'll know that there's a pitch there now, and it's literally just a pitch. You wouldn't have got terracing and dressing rooms and stands and all in there. And the club was growing rapidly. And we won the league in our first season, as you know, 22-23. But then in 24-25, we also won the league and the cup and the shield. We had a clean sweep that season. We were completely unbeaten. So Rovers needed another ground, and they were looking at Sandymount at the time, and that didn't actually work out. But as it happens, Mary Ann O'Neill, her husband Matthew, had died in the meantime, and the couple didn't have any children, so she wasn't able to tend to the farmlands anymore. So she signed over that land, which became Glenmalure Park. She signed that over to the Jesuits. She sold it for £4,500. And then Rovers, I presume they had this idea, well, look, this pitch that we're on, the very first pitch that we're on, it's not suitable. So we'll have a look and see. We didn't get Sandymount, so when this pitch became available, they signed a lease with the Jesuits. A new 9-year lease with the Jesuits in 1926 for what was to later become known as Glenmalure Park. And the Rovers signatories on it there are John Fulham, who was a brother, I believe, of Bob Fulham of 5 Caroline Row, Ringsend, and David Goff, who lived at 115 Ringsend Park. So you can see the connections between Rovers and Ringsend, even though we were moving out to Milltown. I'm not sure what's next there. Yeah, okay, so this, as I said, you can see that was the first pitch. So this offered us a lot more space and room. That was the house there. Those 2 houses belong to Mary Ann O'Neill, but those 2 houses are still there. And you can see the shape if you're actually going by Milltown Road even now. It still has that same shape. The monument is just here. The dressing rooms were there, and the main grandstand was built there. So I'm just going to check now. Oh yeah, so that pitch, that first pitch, just to give you an idea of why it was so unsuitable. Billy Juicy Farrell, who was our top goal scorer in 1924-25, was quoted as saying that there was nothing in that pitch, absolutely nothing, except a shack that was built from railway sleepers. There wasn't even a tap in the ground, and Rovers here were Rovers playing in the top league in Ireland at that stage. So they had to move, they had to do something, and they were restricted in their development there, and that's why they moved into that pitch. But it's also worth noting, because I'm sure that you've all heard of Joe Cunningham and Mary Jane Cunningham. Joe Cunningham came from Clonmel in County Tipperary. He had a GAA background. He had no connections with soccer whatsoever, but he married Mary Jane Fitzpatrick. And in 1925, when the club was stuck for money, they went to Joe Cunningham because he was a very successful insurance agent, and he was well known for being able to make money work. And he put, presuming that he put the money in for Rovers to sign a new 9-year lease with the Jesuits. Now that there is a photograph from the official opening of the main stand at Milltown. That was in 1928. Again, I'm assuming that the club was able to do that because of money that was given to them by Joe Cunningham, who in the meantime had been made club president for, you know, in return, given something back in return. And that's, that is say, was the day of the official opening. A very proud day for the club in 1928, because now Milltown was starting to take on a little bit of a look of a football ground. I should have mentioned actually that there was a photograph in Sunday Independent in July 1926 which showed Rovers players, it described them as Rovers players, working on the new ground. They were getting it ready. The new lease was signed in July 1926. Just show us the next one there. So that's the main stand, as you can see in the background. There were 700 seats in that. A little bit of terracing at the back. That's Joe Cunningham, and that was his wife Mary Jane, who possibly was the first ever female director of a football club in the world, possibly. I'd love people to check that out. I haven't heard of one before that. But everybody knew that she was the real boss, to tell you the truth. Robbie Gaffney might be able to tell us that. You might remember that. He's around there somewhere. Even though it was a little bit before his time. But yeah, so that's how we were progressing on that there. As I said, the new 9-year lease was signed. The official opening of Glenmalure Park was supposed to take place in the last weekend of August 1926. And it was supposed to be against Belfast Celtic, who were a very, very big club up north at the time. I'm sure some of you are familiar with their history. That game had to be put back by 2 weeks because the contractor was still on site. So Rovers' first game of the season was against St James's Gate. They had to play that in what was called Richmond Park from Condra, which we now know is Talca Park. But a very long way for Rovers to have to go out at that time because people didn't have cars and public transport is not what it is now and whatever. Our reserve team were playing a team called BSU, and they couldn't play there either because we were gone from the other pitch. We were waiting to get into Glenmalure Park, and they played that game in Rutland Avenue in Crumlin. And any of you that are from around the area will know that that ground is still there. Rutland Avenue? Yeah, the Transport Club, yeah. That's who's occupying it now. So there was a matter of the very first game we played in Glenmalure Park. And unfortunately it wasn't against Belfast Celtic, although they did provide the opposition for the official opening, which took place a week after the very first game that was played in Glenmalure Park. The first opponents were Dundalk, and it was a very historic occasion because not only was it the first game in Glenmalure Park, but it was also Dundalk's very first season in the League of Ireland and the very first game between Rovers and Dundalk at that level. So okay, I can continue on. Anyway, Dundalk scored the first goal in Milltown, but in actual fact it was Rovers player John Doc Malone who has the honour of going on the score sheet first, because you might have guessed that he scored an OG. So we denied Dundalk that right. So it then came down to the official open. Oh, that first game, I should just say about Dundalk, attracted a crowd of 18,000. And if you think about it, that there wasn't a grandstand in there until 1928. There wasn't any terracing in there either at the time. It was all just embankments. So to get 18,000 into the new ground was a great day, I think, for the club and for the committee and whatever. The game ended 3-3. So the following week then, Belfast Celtic came down and the official opening took place on Sunday the 19th of September 1926. I don't know what the crowd was for that, but I'd say it was a similar sort of crowd. Belfast Celtic won 2-1. Rovers were now based in the new ground at Glenmalure Park. So as time went on, a new members' bar was built beneath the main stand, and a vibrant social scene was built all up around the ground. A lot of this was down to Joe and Mary Cunningham. That's the sort of club that they wanted to build. In 1939 then, you can just go back there. Thanks, Ethan. This photo's from 1942, but I just wanted to show you that this was the unreserved stand on that side, on the opposite side of the ground. And it's what we would call the shed. Is that right, Sean? It became known as the shed, but officially it was known as the unreserved stand. And it was only embankment at that stage, but you can see there all wooden fencing there. There was no concrete fencing around there at the time. So in 1939 then, 900 yards of terracing was constructed at Milltown. And it wasn't actually quite finished probably because of the war, because of the shortage of materials, because of the costs and money was short, whatever. So by 1950, all that terracing was all built and the stands were in place. Milltown looked actually like a great little football ground which could hold up to 25,000. The Cunninghams never gave attendances, so we don't know what the exact record attendance is, but we believe it's probably around 24,000, we think, from 1966 Rovers and Waterford, but there's no way of knowing. It could have been more, who knows. It's like the RDS on opening day in 1990. Nobody knows how many was there. Well, they don't, because John McNamara was asked, and I was standing beside him at the time, the media wanted to know how many was there, and he said, say 22,000. So we don't know how many was there. But anyhow, we do know that Milltown could hold up to about 25,000. So, also during this time, Glenmalure Park hosted other sports, including cricket and boxing. And the Dundrum Brass and Reed Band performed regularly at games at Milltown to raise funds for their group, and other community groups were often permitted to use the ground. So there wasn't anything done at the ground from 1950 on until 1972, when, dare I say it, the Kilcoynes took over. I knew there'd be a few rules there, all right. It wasn't until Johnny Giles came in as manager in 1977 that we saw any sort of real improvements there, when they knocked down the terrace. And you can move on there, Ethan, thanks. You can see the old stand there. That was the main grandstand, and there was terracing on both sides of the stand. Down beside where Mary Ann O'Neill's house was, there was terracing there. So when Giles came in, they turned the members' club into a nightclub, which was called the Hoops. And there was also another function room upstairs. And for the life of me, I can't remember what the room upstairs was called. No, it had a name as well when it was being heard out. Anyway, they had two function rooms, and that was to generate, funds for the club. But they also knocked down the terracing on the far side and turned it into a car park. And they were the only improvements basically that were done to Glenmalure Park from 1950 all the way up to the time that Giles came in. How the Kilcoynes got involved was, well, they were going around looking to buy into a club at the time. They tried to buy Drumcondra. Yeah, exactly. Tried to buy Drumcondra and they weren't successful. And as Sean says, if they had maybe got their hands on Talca Park would have been housing and not Glenmalure Park. The Kilcoynes, they had companies called Healy Homes and Valley Ice Cream, which got into very serious financial difficulties. The banks were knocking down the doors, and the Kilcoynes decided that in order to pay their bills or whatever, that they'd hatch this plot to buy out Milltown. How they bought out from the Cunninghams in 1972 was that Joe Cunningham and Mary Jane were now in their 80s. Joe had suffered three strokes, and the younger members of the family, they were looking after their own businesses and whatever. Some of them were living abroad, so they didn't have the same interest. So the arrangements suited both. And I think also it was 1972 that the Palmerston Rugby Club sold its land to for development. So, if you want to connect that with the Kilcoynes buying Milltown at that time, if you want to believe that they actually schemed and hatched that plot, 15 years later, well, they probably did, because that's the way these people operate. So as I say, the ground was looking good when Giles was there. I don't have to tell anybody who attended Milltown what the pitch was like. You've all heard about the pitch in Milltown, yeah? All you young people there. Hear about the pitch in Milltown? Yeah, it was the greatest pitch ever, I think. I remember when Celtic played us in 1986, the night before that game when they were training and they were coming off the pitch, I distinctly heard one of their players saying to the other, "That pitch is too good to play on." So that gives you an idea of exactly how good that pitch was. I never saw anything like it, and it would be like that all through the winter. There would be very little tear on the goal mouths or whatever. So the Kilcoynes were forced to spend £30,000 in 1986 prior to the Celtic game, and that was £30,000. It mightn't sound a lot now, but it was an awful lot of money then, I can tell you. You'd probably buy a house for that, I think, at that stage. They were fuming over that fact because there was very strict health and safety regulations imposed on them after the Bradford City. The tragedy in Bradford City was around the year before that, when 56 people lost their lives in for Valley Parade is what I was trying to think to name the ground. So the Kilcoynes, I know because I was on the supporters club at the time, and I know that they were absolutely fuming over the fact that they had to spend that money. So in one sense, the fact that they had to spend that money probably hastened our exit from Milltown, because there was no way that at that stage, they should have been looking to see who they could sell Shamrock Rovers to at that stage, because they couldn't possibly continue to finance it. But probably, as I said, trying to get their hands on that ground. You can move on there, Ethan. Let me see what's next. Just to give you an idea, this photograph was taken during the very successful 1950s team, the Colts. I mean, just look at that crowd there. Everybody is standing. It was all standing except for the small stand. And there was never any issues. So it didn't have to have stewards, segregation, all that type of thing. I mean, look at that crowd there. The Rovers were getting regular crowds of 20, 22,000, 24,000 at their games during that time. What's next there, Ethan? So that was the main grandstand that was built in 1928. And just on the other side, Ethan, that was the shed where Sean McNulty and all his mates used to hang around in. And you can't mention the shed and Sean McNulty and all these guys without mentioning the sheriff. So, the sheriff was the man in charge of security. And I have to tell you, they all respected him. Yeah, but he was known as the sheriff. We called him as the sheriff. They called him the sheriff. His name was Sheriff. But those two photographs that you saw there were actually my photographs. I hadn't seen colour photographs of Milltown before that time. I just went up to the ground one morning, the team were training up there. It was a lovely September morning and I just took those two photographs. I'm really glad, they were taken in 1981. I'm really glad that I took those photographs because we don't have a lot otherwise, and especially not in colour. So I'm just coming to the end of this now, guys. As we all know, the final game was in April, 12th of April 1987. It came as a bolt out of the blue. None of us knew anything about it. The Kilcoynes obviously knew about it. It was the last game of the season against Sligo Rovers, an FAI Cup semi-final, second leg. And I think the Kilcoynes just wanted to get the season over. Because normally, if you had a game postponed during the year, it would be put back to the end of the season. But there was a great effort made on Sunday the 18th of January when the pitch was covered with snow. It would normally have always been called off, that the Kilcoynes asked everybody to come up, all the fans to come up and to help clear the snow off the pitch. And if you look at it now, it's because they just wanted that season over as quickly as they possibly could. And then when we were all gone after that last match, they were going to announce it in some way or other that Glenmalure Park was sold. None of us even knew they were in negotiations with the Jesuits to buy the land. But just one little interesting point about Glenmalure Park and about Milltown and about Mary Ann O'Neill's lands and the Jesuits' lands was that back in 1920-21, Rathmines Urban District Council attempted to CPO all that land to build 77 social houses. Only for Mary Ann O'Neill and the Jesuits put up a very hard fight and prevented them from doing so. We may never have played in Glenmalure Park. I'm sure all of us who were there absolutely loved that ground. We've got a lovely ground now called Tallaght Stadium. I don't know what Glenmalure Park would, if it would have survived, or you could only enter from one side, so it had its limitations, but who knows what would have happened. I mean, Talca Park is still there. Dailyman Park is still there. You mightn't know it, but it's still there. So it was Charlie Stewart, the Irish Press soccer correspondent, who broke the story in the Irish Press newspaper. And I have to tell you, it's a day I will never ever forget in my life. There's only 3 phone lines into my job. All 3 phone lines were going all day long, people looking for me. And I think the other staff said to me, look, you're not going to get anything done today, just sit in that office there and just keep answering all those phone calls. Because there's Rovers fans saying, this can't be true. Like, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have WhatsApp groups, you had nothing at the time. Like, you were dependent on the newspapers. I mean, the RT might have mentioned it. They always like to mention things that are not directly connected with the grounds. So that's me basically, guys. I was going to say one last little thing there in relation to the grounds, but hold on a second. If you just bear with me, guys, please, for a moment. Yeah, where did the ground get the name Glenmalure Park? Well, again, I was lucky in this regard that I got to talk to a lot of people in my time when I was researching Rovers, and one of the people that I met was Arthur Cunningham, who was the youngest son of the Cunningham family, and he was a director of the club as well. So he explained to me that Mary Jane and Joe were driving down Wicklow one Sunday afternoon, and they came into a place called Glenmalure, and they just loved the name so much that when they came home, they named their home in Bath Street in Irishtown, Glenmalure. And it just so happens that at the same time the newspapers were referring to Glenmalure Park, as it wasn't Glenmalure Park at that time, they were referring to it as Milltown Park, and the Jesuits actually asked Rovers, look, can you put a name onto this ground, because Milltown Park is the name of our facilities and we don't want people to be getting mixed up or thinking that we're staging these soccer grounds. And so basically that's how the ground got the name Glenmalure Park. So maybe I might come back some other day and talk about the great games, the great names, everything else. But today I was just wanted to give you a history of the ground. And it may be gone, but it'll always be here for a lot of us. Thanks very much.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how I follow you all, but I won't go down all that road again. I'm just going to talk as a supporter. I'm from Milltown, Columbanus Road. Peter Richardson is my name, if anyone doesn't know me. I'm following Rovers since the late 60s. Milltown was always there. I was a milkman in another life, so I could ramble down there any time I wanted it. Gates were always open. Billy Lord was there, and it was just magical. So we never thought it was going to go. It was part of Milltown, and that's what it was. So Rob has gone off all through the history what happened, but the Kilcoynes didn't really touch on them. What they done was a disgrace, and if you look at your history books now, and I want to touch on another thing, lads. Thomas Davis are absolutely scumbags, because if you Google or look into the lengths they went to keep soccer out of Tallaght, it was unbelievable. Judicial review in the end, a judge called Murphy voted in favour of the council, which let us in. Unfortunately, we weren't in by the date we were meant to be in, due to Thomas Davis, so the council took back the land. We don't own the stadium, which to me is very sad, but it is what it is. Anyway, as I say, I lived up the road. Some great families followed Rovers. I see Paddy Daly. I remember his mother and father, super people. I see the Cone, Mr. Cone up there, another lad, the Mulhollands. Who do I leave out? Nobody. Tom Hand up the back, George Kelly. We were all from this area. All Rovers fans. I see them still today, which is brilliant. Robbie Gaffney, went to school with him. First player to ever win the Rovers Player of the Year was in the Hoops Bar. I think it a little bit with dealing with organising it. I see John up there, ex-RTE, you needn't do. But anyway, John is as old as myself, super Rovers fan. Well, you know you think you are, John. I don't know what you're looking in, but you definitely are.
I look as old as you, Phil.
Look, I still have fucking hair. Anyway, I say, it's great, as I say, I think of Paddy there and his man Dad. I was in his house a couple of times and they had their scarves on and they're going down to Milltown and all, and we lost it all and it was shocking, shameful. But we are where we are, as I say. I'd like to touch on the Ultras. Brilliant bunch of lads, all new to me, probably a lot of them don't even know me. But the amount of new fans we have in the club now, we're the older lemons on the other side of I think we're in X or something. But all the boys are in this side, all the young lads, and it's super. And you know what, there's a lady sits beside us, or stands beside us, she's 80 years of age, it's absolutely amazing. And then you look over and you see all the young kids, and the next day, I mean, our future is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And when you look at our academy, and what we have, and look at the young lads that were out the other night, I mean, I'm still on a high over Friday night, I'm sure we all are. But it's just a super club, we've super people running it. I mean, the amount of work the volunteers do, I'll be honest, I'm not a volunteer, I never work for them, but do you know what I mean? What can I say? They do brilliant work, brilliant. And I'm going to leave it at that, lads, because I'm delighted I came down, and I'm very delighted I was asked to say a few words. So God bless you all. FTD and with the hips on.
I was born, as Peter said, in Mulvey Park. There were three estates, Mulvey, Columbanus and Rosemount. And I was only, I think it was 12 when I went to my first Rovers game. My dad, God rest him, worked in CIE in Donnybrook. And he had access at the time to the Hennessy stand. And, he had access to the Hennessy stand. And I loved the fact when the players come out of the dressing room, the green and white hoops, I was in awe of them and, you know, what they represented. I was lucky to see Frank O'Neill, John was saying, I just idolised them as a player, wanted to be him one day. So then, fast forward, I played for Rosemount Boys, and we did good side in the under 16 schoolboy league, and we played home farm one day in Rosemount, a really good home farm team. I think it was the team that it's in the Guinness Book of Records for undefeated games or something like that, and we played them on the day, and we were beaten in extra time. But I was disappointed, obviously, to lose. But the highlight of the day was, I didn't know it, Sean Carroll, who was representing Rovers, came over to me and said, would you like to come down to Milltown to train? I just couldn't believe it. I mean, that opportunity, I never got, say, a schoolboy recognition or anything, anything like that. But to be asked to play for Rovers, or sorry, to come down and even train with Rovers, was unbelievable. The manager at the time was Sean Thomas, and he took myself, Lar Wise, and Brendan Flynn, he was a goalkeeper, were taken down. We were given the opportunity of a trial, and I played a couple of friendlies, and then they offered me a contract. I swear to God, lads, I thought I'd won the lotto. I mean, Tom Hand, I see at the back. Tom Hand was one exactly like Peter Richardson's would say, and the whole estate was Rovers mad. But I wanted to go into Tom and say, you won't believe it, Tom, I've got an opportunity to play for Rovers. But subsequently, fast forward after that, I got the opportunity. I signed. Lar Wise signed with me. We played, I think it was Cork away. Cork, believe it or not, had brought a couple of Germans, ex-German internationals over. And we played in Flower Lodge or Turner's Cross. Yeah, and I did well. And then the breaking news at the end of the season was, we were all told to wait in the dressing room. That was breaking news at the end of the season. And the word was Johnny Giles was coming in. And I thought at that stage, that's it for me. I'm a one-season wonder with Rovers. And because we were getting the name of the players who Giles were going to bring over. He was bringing lads from West Brom, Chelsea, Man United, Francis Bournes. I didn't think I'd have a chance. And then my old pal Lar Wise was told the contract wasn't being renewed. And I thought, I'm definitely next. So he was called in, and I actually idolized Giles separately anyway. I thought he was just different grade, different class. Seen him play for Ireland, seen him play for Leeds. And I was in awe of the man. And he said to me, we'd like you to sign and continue your contract. And that was it. This was the time I wanted to go to Tom Hand's house and now wake him up in the middle of the night and say, Tom, I've got a 2-year contract with Rovers. And for those that Mick Kearns and Mick McCarthy and Ger Fearley and that would know, I then got ready for pre-season in Milltown, and I had a chopper bike, and I had a chopper bike and an Umbro bag. So I arrived for my first pre-season with Rovers, and then I saw the entourage of the English registered cars coming in, and I just took the chopper bike into the corner with the Umbro bag, because the first car came in was a 5 Series BMW. I'd never seen one. And Giles, the car was 10 times bigger than Giles, you know. And he parked there. Eamon Dunphy came in a Lancia Delta, looking $1 million. Ray Tracy came in, I don't know, I'm going to call it a Porsche for the sake of that. And I just had the chopper bike in the eye. And I just said nothing and got on with it. And I knew I was involved in something special, really special. I mean, everything about them, the persona, how they went about it, the pitch. I think John mentioned the pitch. We played Liverpool Liverpool had won the European Cup. I think we played them on a Tuesday evening. Tuesday or Wednesday evening. Brilliant night, and they were collectively saying, this is some pitch. And it was a snooker table. And it was just brilliant to play on, brilliant to be given the opportunity to play on. And then fast forward, I got like no recognition as a schoolboy, now playing for Rovers, now going through the estate Mulvey Park with my chest out, lads asking for autographs. It's just unbelievable. The chopper bike was replaced by a Nissan Micra. I got a Nissan Micra just to be part, keep up with the Joneses. At the Joneses. And I got called in again. I was called in. I thought I did well. Giles was picking me, including me in it. I mean, this was a team that had internationals, like Paddy Mulligan was there, Francis Burns had come in, Stevie Loynix was the winger who come in from West Brom. Class act. Up front, Ray Tracy, sorry, separate to Ray, was it Ray Hankin? Was it Hankin? Yeah, Hankin. Huge guy, huge, legs bigger than me, you know, just massive guy. And I'd listen to them on the away trips, still not thinking I was part of Rovers. From being the 12-year-old that saw them in the Hennessy stand to now playing with them. And then I did, and Jason Maloney is here, I was dropped for the 78 final. And I thought I had actually a very good cup run up to that. I scored against Limerick in the quarter final. I thought I did well. It was actually the first time that I ran over to the shed. And I think Sean Mack, who had hair then, and Peter Richardson, who looked like a boy band singer, you know what I mean? They all recognised me, and I knew this is something special, because it scored and I was on the shed and they were acknowledging it, and it was brilliant. It was brilliant. That was, I just had this thing, this is unique, this is brilliant, I live off this, and I have lived off it, lads, by the way, for 100 years. I played for other clubs, nothing comes near Rovers, nothing. I was just talking to Nick there as well. There's a special person as well who's no longer with us that was part of it. And I'd just like to acknowledge, you know, the fact that Mark Megan was also a local lad from Wickham Park. Mark has passed away and he was part of that group. So just a recognition for Mark. But the night of nights, as Peter said, was my family were there. And Giles wouldn't have been the greatest now from the social end of it. It was orange juice, Britvic orange, and then he would sing, he'd have a sing song after a match, and it was as dull as dishwater. It was like, don't cry for me Argentina was his party piece. Don't cry for me Argentina, and it went on for hours, you know, hours. But at the table that night in the Hoops Club, we were all told from the first thing that the supporters had put on a gig and we were all to attend. And I just went, as in my girlfriend at the time, my now wife Gwen, she thought she was going to be the first wag out in Mulvey Park. And she came. She hasn't been to a game since, but she went that way. But when Jimmy Gillespie, I think it was on the stage, and he announced, he says, and lads, and think about the table from my end of it, lads, right? Johnny Giles, Eamon Dunphy, Ray Tracy, Stevie Loynix, Alan O'Neill, Mark Megan,
No,
Noel Sinnott, Johnny Fulham, Dave Irvin, all at the table, and then there's Robbie Gaffney. And it said, oh, Jim Beglin was there. Jim Beglin was there as well, and Pierce O'Leary. So I didn't think, I'm here to drink me Briffic Orange, take me new wag home, and leave it at that. And then Jimmy Gillespie, the ninth, announced on the night, and the first Shamrock Rovers Player of the Year is Robbie Gaffney. And when I say, lads, honest to God, my sons are members, my grandchildren go, they all know that Grandad was the first Shamrock Rovers Player of the Year. I milked it on every trip the lads have been with, and I will continue to milk it until it's over for me. That was special. In the end, Gwen became a wag. But we won the cup. I was dropped for the cup. I also won the Tyler Cup, won a League Cup. Represented Ireland at under 21. Everything that good that I could have dreamed of.
What about the nutmeg?
Nutmeg on Peter Reid and everything. It's on YouTube. Yeah, look, he rings me now and then and said, really, leave it out and don't see Rovers and Powers. But lads, just a recognition to everything that's put it on. I really appreciate the fact that I was even asked to attend. I attend all the games, home and away on the WAC Express. I love the club. My family love the club. My grandchildren love the club. And thanks ever so much for all of it.
Anyway, like a lot of people at the time, I took the loss of Milltown very badly and very personally. So I'm really honoured to be here today, and it's just great to see people who were interested in something that we lost almost 40 years ago. And I'd just like to thank the lads for acknowledging the centenary of the establishment of Glenmalure Park. What I'm going to get into is kind of more personal stuff, because for me, the way I look at Rovers and Milltown and everything is there's what happens on the pitch and what happens off the pitch, and for me they're equally important. And you know, sometimes what happens on the pitch isn't great, and what happens off the pitch is brilliant. Sometimes it's vice versa, and once, a couple of times in a lifetime, both things converge, and then it's pure magic. But anyway, just want to explain. You know, I started going to Rovers. Well, I was brought to Rovers, you know, as an infant. I didn't even know what a Rover was. First few years, I just looked forward to maybe getting a bag of crisps and a bottle of Coke at half time. Couldn't care less what was going on the pitch. Took a while, when I was about 10, it was the 70-71 season. It was the first year I kind of started taking it seriously and like noticing who the good players were, and you know, Frank O'Neill out in the wing, Mick Leach sticking in the goals. Mick Leach. Anyone here ever see Mick Leach play? Yes. The remarkable thing about Mick was he walked around like a guy who was in a park looking for a lost dog. But once he got into the penalty area, he was like a Rottweiler on crack cocaine, and the ball was in the back of the net. It was amazing. Anyway, the 70-71 season, Mick and Frank were still there. It was the year that Rovers ended up in the playoff for the league against Cork Hibs. And I remember that season we played Hibs in Milltown, and there was 22,000 people there. So I'm told anyway. But the place was packed. And it just really struck me that within 2 years, I was at a home game against Dundalk, and there were only 600 people there. 2 years.
I was on that game. I was one of the 600, you're right.
Yeah, I think I borrowed my bus fare home off. Anyway. I mean, the whole thing was, the time I started taking Rovers seriously was when everybody else seemed to be not taking Rovers seriously. The club itself went into a terrible decline, and by 1975-76 we finished in the bottom two, had to apply for re-election for the first time in our history, and that was awful. And then the following season, although we won the League Cup early in that season, it was another dismal campaign for the Hoops, and as we came into our last home game against Athlone Town, we needed to win to avoid a second re-election. You know, and I remember going to the game that day thinking, Jesus, we're really gone down the dumps. But the true tragedy was the number of people who turned up. It's legendary at this stage. There were only 63 people at the game. Rovers actually won 1-0, goal from Paul McGee, son of legendary broadcaster Jimmy McGee. But my only memory of what happened on the pitch was John Minnock missing a penalty for Athlone Town and blasting the ball into Randy Park. It's probably still in somebody's back garden. But the girls thing that day, although the crowd was just pathetic, there wasn't even any security.
Saturday afternoon.
It's Saturday afternoon. It was the 2nd of April 1977. It was a 2 o'clock kick-off, and it coincided with the Grand National over in Aintree. Now, to me, I couldn't give a fuck if the World Cup final was on. Rovers were playing. But anyway, it was what it was. But it really struck me, looking back on it, that was kind of like the kinds of giving up at that stage. And I remember thinking, the club was really stuck. But ironically, that was the bottoming out of that period, because John Giles came along as player manager just within weeks, and things picked up again. And Giles came over promising the Art Moon and the European Cup. Didn't quite work out like that. We won the FAI Cup. The first season was brilliant, and we had a couple of really good results and performances in Europe, but it petered out. Then Jim McLaughlin came in and we won the 4 in a row, and then you know what happened after that. And oddly enough, the last time I was at a game in Milltown, it was a charity game in May. I think it was for goal, and they had the Rovers team of the 50s playing the Rovers team of the 60s, and the Rovers team of the 70s playing the Rovers team of the 80s. And I came in, I just turn around to my, okay, here we go, get me perspective here. I would always come in the turnstiles around here, because you come up these steps, and they got to the top of those steps, you just got this panoramic view of the ground. And I remember that was one thing that struck me as a kid. It just looked brilliant. And I remember later on, around the early 80s, I used to be a programme seller, and that was my pitch at the top, because you get a lot of people obviously coming in there. And it was great, because every now and again, shut up, Jerry. It was great now and again, you get some guy coming up with his son, the first time, and they get to the top, and it was brilliant, just brilliant, because like straight away you were going, yeah, this is cool, you know. It's something that's that's one of the things that made Milltown quite distinctive. Another thing was around behind the 2 goals and along the shed touchline, the terrace actually went below the pitch. So if you were right down the front as a kid, you'd be looking at the pitch, like sort of from your neck up. It was amazing. Like when I was 9 or 10, you was going, wow. So I remember Rovers playing Everton in 1970, and you're kind of going, it's the guy off the telly, and he's like 2 feet away taking a corner. Wow, So for that last game that I went to, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s team, I took my usual steps. I went into the shed. I used to stand roughly about 10, 12 steps down from the shop. People remember the shop at the back of the shed? Just about there. And I remember thinking, God, this is probably the last time I'm going to be doing this. And then I started thinking about my childhood and just the memories of the place. And so I wandered down behind the goal, which is where I used to be when I was a kid. And I stood right behind the goal again. And it was quite touching, but the thing that really, it's amazing, that sticks in my memory from that day, I don't remember a thing about the games, but I do remember the first game was the 50s against the 60s, and Amy Sheila Darcy was in goal in front of me, and I'm going like, absolute Rovers legend. Okay, he's beyond his prime, but there he is. And then at half time, obviously they switched sides. Pat Dunn came down, another Rovers goalkeeper legend. Actually, little side about Pat Dunn, I don't know if people know this, but I doubt if this will ever happen again. But in 1963-64, he won a championship medal with Shamrock Rovers, and he was signed by Manchester United. A year later, he won the first division title with Manchester United. I mean, can anyone picture that happening again? Not a chance. Anyway, Pat comes down, I'm behind the goal. I got to know Pat as a kid in the 70s, because there were so few people going to Rovers that if you were regular, they kind of, and they came up, yourself, and just saw something in the net, in the back of the goal. And he went down, he picked a little bag, and he takes this thing out, he says, it's Sheila Darcy's teeth. He left his dentures in the bag, in the goal. And as mad as it is, that's my fun memory of Milltown. That's it, folks.
How are you doing, lads? Sorry I can't be there tonight. I'm on commentary duty for Benfica against Sporting tonight, which is the equivalent in Portugal of Rovers against Bows. So I couldn't get out of it, so I can't be there tonight. But thanks a million to Ethan and the lads for asking me to contribute to this tonight. Sorry about the noise of the traffic going past, by the way. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me okay. And this is take 2, by the way. I was just finished the first take, and a woman came out from her house and asked us what we were filming here and all that, interrupted us, and so I'm having to start again. But anyway, here we are on Milltown Road outside Glenmalure Park, and this is it's a special place, for many Rovers fans of a certain generation. This was the Holy Grail. This is, the games were played on a Sunday afternoon. And in my case, my family wasn't very religious or anything like that. So this was our place of worship on a Sunday afternoon. And it was a place that we love to come to. For me, it's still quite emotional to be here on a day like that. For years, after Rovers moved out of Milltown, I couldn't pass by here. I didn't pass by here. And I was in a taxi one day, and we came along this route, and I passed it by for the first time, and I saw the houses in real life for the first time, and it was like a punch in the stomach. It was horrible. And so I've always tried to kind of avoid the area because it's just too sad for me to pass by here. I have so many memories. I started coming here as a really young kid with my brother Kieran and my dad Brian, and this was our place every Sunday in the early 70s. And then Kieran died in a road accident in 1974, and it was just me and Dad, and we were coming here to every game. We went away to every game as well, and it was our place, great memories. I remember the first time I ever came here, or at least the first time I remember being here. As a young kid, I was in short trousers walking up towards the Gonzaga end of the ground on the terrace, and I fell, and I cut my knee. And it's funny the things you remember like that. I was probably 4, maybe 5 years of age, and I couldn't tell you what I had for my dinner yesterday, but I remember that moment vividly. And after that, I was put up sitting on a barrier behind one of the stanchions behind the crush barriers behind the goal, and I know John Herrick was playing in the match. I've just got maybe that because it was an unusual name or something, it stuck in my head. And his son Mark actually he's one of the coaches for Galway, and he came up to me in the tunnel in Tala the other day and sort of shook my hand because he had heard me talking about the fact that I remembered his dad from one of my very first games, But those tears, it started in tears and it ended in tears for me, because the last time I was here, I was working in Ranelagh up the road, and I came down one lunchtime after Rovers had moved out, and one of the gates was broken, and I was able to get into the ground, and at that stage it was all overgrown. The pitch, which had been like a carpet here, the pitch in Milltown was as good when it was at its best as the pitch in Tala when it was at its best recently as well. I mean, it was a carpet, it was a beautiful surface. Johnny Giles was involved in getting that surface perfect. And suddenly I walked in, and the pitch was like an overgrown meadow, and there was grass growing on the terraces, and the stand was starting to fall apart a bit, and it was really sad. I remember I sat on the terrace, this end of the ground, the road end of the ground, looking out, and I actually bawled my eyes out. It was really, really sad, because I had so many memories from down through the years here, and it was over, and you didn't know what was going to happen. So that was, awful. And I do have so many great memories of the place. Like we transitioned from the terrace to the little stand near the main gate, and then from there to the main stand. And obviously in the main stand, it was like divided into 3, the right, the middle, and the other side. And, I remember Pierce O'Leary's parents used to come to every game. and Liam Buckley's girlfriend. I remember her as well. I might have been young, but I still had an eye for the women. And Jim Beglin, there was a time before he moved to Liverpool when he was sitting in the stand just like a couple of seats away from me, and I remember, you know, just being in awe of the fact that I was sitting beside one of the Rovers players in the stand. And then we transitioned to the middle bit, which Dad, he was kind of friendly with Louis Kilcoyne at the time. And every time I mentioned Louis's name, I should pause to allow for a round of hissing and booing in the pub as you're watching this. But he was fairly friendly with Louis, and his background was in advertising and in marketing. He was saying, you know, why not start a patrons club, as they called it in those days, kind of like a predecessor to the 400 Club. And the difference with the patrons was that they had their own little bar under the stand, which was a really nice little bar. You had green cushions under your arse instead of the wooden bench, and you entered through the back of the stand up the stairs. Tom McCran, who still goes to the matches, was there at the back of the stand to make sure that you had your pass to get up there. And Tom always greeted you with a smile and a friendly few words, which was really nice. And I used to sit behind where the RTE commentator was. Maybe that's where I got the bug or something. But in those days, it would have been Phil Green, George Hamilton, Gabriel Egan. And so I had my place where I always sat. And there were two old lads who sat behind me who, like, were very old, even in those days. When you're 15, everybody seems old. But these were old, and they both smoked the pipe. I don't know, some of you may remember who those two fellas were. But they were like the two fellas in the balcony up in the Muppets, the two old lads, you know. But the smell of that pipe smoke, just once in a blue moon, I'd be walking in a street or something, and I'd pass by somebody smoking a pipe, and I'd get that smell again, and it just immediately brings me back to Milltown and you know, those amazing days. It wasn't always great. In the 70s, there were some pretty poor teams that we had, no money. And then into the 80s, well, Giles in the late 70s came along, we won the cup, and into the 80s, the 4 in a row. And what a team that was, you know, Pat Byrne, Jacko McDonough, Mick Neville, Liam Buckley, Alan Campbell, great players down there. We were lucky to see them play here. You know, it's a fabulous team. When you compare it now to the Rovers team of now, it's of a similar quality, I would say. You know, but we did have special days, European nights as well, European afternoons, because it wasn't always under the lights. I mean, we played Linfield here on an afternoon kickoff, load of police outside the ground, and I remember I got to the ground early. I was meeting Dad here, and just before kickoff, a load of Linfield fans were escorted into the ground by the guards, and it was a sickener, absolute sickener, because Rovers fans had been banned from going to the away leg up in Windsor Park. And to see these fellas marching in, and then the fact that Linfield went through in the end despite Peter Eccles' goal, it was horrible. That was one of the really bad days, but there were great days as well, and some, you know, really special memories, special goals, which will always be with us for the people that were here. And then obviously when the news broke that we were going to be leaving Milltown, it was just like an unimaginable body blow. I know Dad never spoke to Louis Kilcoyne again, ever, after that. And Louis met me at a bus stop down the road there, just after it had been announced. And he was saying to me, will you be coming to Tolka? And I said, over my dead body, no way. You know, they were awful days. And it was a really sad end, because it's such a special place. And I think the guys who made the monument, or who had the monument installed here, deserve a huge amount of credit, because you know, there are probably people living in those houses now who don't even know that there used to be a football stadium here. But I always kind of hope that the houses are haunted. You know, I'm sure they are haunted, because there's so many amazing players and amazing memories. And I had one opportunity to play on the pitch just before we left. There was a charity match here. Tony Ward was playing in it, and Paddy Mulligan, and Jimmy Greeley, I remember, and a few others anyway. But I did a goal line clearance from a shot by Ben Hannigan. So that was my claim to fame in Milltown. But I get very emotional coming here and even standing by the monument now today, you know, because I have so many memories. A few standout ones. The time, it's kind of funny in a way, but the time that Mark Megan got injured poor Mark who died there recently, and Mark needed to go off on a stretcher. You know, who has a stretcher? Where's the stretcher? Couldn't find a stretcher anywhere. He was carried off on a wooden bench from one of the dugouts. You know, that's how haphazard things were at times. The time, speaking of the dugouts, the time Harry Kenny broke his leg here, I think it was against Sligo Rovers. If I'm not mistaken, it was John Shervey. And if I'm wrong, apologies to John Shervey. But when Harry broke his leg, I have never in all my life heard a crack like it. You could have heard the crack down at Donnybrook Church. It was so loud. It was awful, a really horrible moment. And they did have a stretcher to take him off that day. But that's just, you know, some of the memories. Some of the old songs stick in my head as well. You know, the Leachy here, Leachy there, Leachy every fucking where was a great one. And for some reason, the Rovers fans used to sing "We Are the Mujahideen," which was an unusual one. But it just little things like that stick in your mind. But you know, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see Rovers playing here, it is still a huge part of the club. I mean, the ground in Tala now is amazing. I love it. And Tala is the beating heart of Shamrock Rovers, but part of the club's soul will always be here at Glenmalure Park, Milltown. And we all, those of us who were lucky enough to be here, have very, very special memories of being here. Just want to thank everybody, Ethan, who asked me to contribute to this. I think it's a great idea to have a night like this, and for maybe for some of the younger fans to hear some of the stories from some of the older fans of times gone by. I want to thank Terry Healy, who's on the camera here. Hopefully you can hear me well. This wouldn't have worked on a mobile phone with all the traffic going back and forth around us, but hopefully with the microphones you can hear me. So thanks to Terry, who's our LOI TV cameraman and a great hoop as well. And listen, enjoy the rest of the night, folks. Have a good one, and keep on hooping. See you soon.
Good evening, folks. Firstly, just honoured and delighted that Nathan from the Ultras came to me and asked me to speak at this brilliant event, and fair play for everyone for organising, for people for turning up. Unlike a lot of the other guys who've spoken before, I hadn't got a long history in Milltown. I've been brought sporadically over the years by my dad. The odd game, I remember being in Milltown in 70 and 80. I remember being at the 78 Cup final when Robbie Gaffney was dropped, and other games like that. But people talk about fate in life, and it was actually, my mother was in hospital having trouble with pregnancy with my younger brother Jonathan, who was obviously a Rovers fan now as well. And it happened to be sent down to me, to my dad's, my granny in Crumlin, and my uncles used to go to the games at that time to Rovers to Milltown. And it happened to be the first game of the 4 in a row in 83, October the 2nd, 83, I think it was, against Strada. We won the game, and I actually met the guy at the AGM yesterday, my uncle's mate, Lars Stafford, who was at the AGM yesterday, and I shook his hand again. He'll always be the first guy that gave me the lift to the game at Milltown, where I went every week. Then I don't think I missed a game at Milltown after that, from that first time all the way through. So I was glad to be there. So Nathan asked me to speak about, you know, obviously it's great. I've seen some great times in Milltown, 4 in a row. I was lucky that every year I went regularly was during the 4 in a row. But Nathan asked me specifically to speak about the aftermath of Milltown, like the protests, the Cram campaign, the talk of boycott, and then what ensued afterwards, and what we went through during that time. We talk about the protests at Talca and the Keep Rovers at Milltown campaign. It actually started at that last game in Milltown on the 12th of April 1987. As Robert said there earlier about, at the time, you know, there was a shock when people seen it in the paper on the 10th of April on the Friday, and there were no WhatsApp groups, and there was no internet for people to organise and mobilise, you know, to have a protest on the pitch, which is ultimately what happened, you know. So it was kind of a lot of ad lib with that. People were just meeting in the ground. I went to the ground that day, had my usual route down to the ground in Milltown, and I went in, met the lads, I stood beside the shed. We had a routine, we'd stand just in front of the shop in the shed in Milltown for the first half, and you were able to cross over at half time, and then we'd stand behind wherever goal Rovers shot into in the second half. But there was a thing in the air that day, and people were like, there was something going to happen. Obviously, people had made banners. So the protest really happened there, started off at half time in that game. My mate Sean McNulty sitting there, you've probably seen the iconic photo that's been around with the banner, Will Greed kill the hoops, himself and others, that photograph has been, reproduced, and reposted on various social media groups over the years. So that's how it really started. So at the time I started I was only 4 years going to Rovers regularly then, and I was actually on the support subcommittee in 1987, the last year in Milltown. I thought I'd be on the committee to help maybe organise away trips, sell programmes, advertise games, stuff like that. Didn't realise that we'd be going to a battle to save the ground literally 9 or 10 months later, but that's what happened. And obviously the support subcommittee at the time, some great people on that there, some people, the likes of that no longer with us, the likes of Liam Christie, Paddy Malone, people like that. I'm probably forgetting some people here, but these are people who were determined. And we had a long fight to try and save the ground, and we believed we could save the ground, we really did. As I said, I was young, 17, naive. We had people like Jimmy Keane, Big J, he was there, and he was the one that just kept us going. He would say, we're going to win this battle, and we kept believing, we had so many events, as I said, the Cram campaign there, I know we didn't hear from Con, but his dad, Brian Murphy, you had Jimmy Keane on the Cram committee, you think you'd Jerry Mackey, you'd Ed Kenny, people like that, really. Yeah, and we were behind them. We were the support committee. We were like the military wing of the Cram campaign. We were the ones doing the groundwork. But we'd lots of events done there. It's hard to explain. Dublin in 1987 was a different time. You probably have seen the video of recently that resurfaced on social media of the night in Humphreys, where we had with Dermot Morgan, we were singing "We're Never Going to Leave Milltown," and that was the fighting spirit at the time around that. But we had various vigils and stuff like that. And the decision was taken to boycott Tolka Park. It wasn't taken easily, it wasn't. People had to think long and hard. Right, I'm not going to beat around the bush. There were falling outs with people. Some people decided to go, and that's fair. That's all under the water now. It's bridge under the water then. But it happened at the time, and there probably were falling outs. But on that, Tolka Park, every second Friday we'd go and we'd stand outside, and I met people, looking around the room, looking at people here that I'd met through that, and we were galvanised ourselves, and I met some great Rovers people, we'd have the same routine, we'd be there before kick-off, and then we'd go to Fagan's at half-time for a pint, and then back for the second half, and that was what was done every week, and then...
I robbed the footballs.
Yeah, robbed the footballs there, yeah. And then back to and the White Horse, the legendary White Horse at the time. That was our most of the campaign that would have been done. The White Horse on Board Quay was a great Rovers pub at the time. So as I said, we met some. I made some great friends. I actually met my current partner Sandra for the first time on the Tolka Park boycott. So that's football romance for you. That's it. Yeah. So we had. For the fight for Milltown was going on in the back, and we thought we'd have a chance of winning. We had a lot of public opinion behind us, but we didn't have the FEI behind us, and that was a crucial thing. They didn't back us. They helped save Dalymount Park, and they helped save United Park in the years not too long before that. But they did nothing to try and help us. And the fact that they made Louis Cocoyne their president years later, I was absolutely kicking the balls for every one of us. That was absolutely scandalous. But it says we organised, we had marches through town. We were on television programmes. The Today Tonight was the prime time of the era. That was the one where the Humphreys video was on, and Nick Coffey reported on that. And we'd lots of public opinion behind us, but just hadn't got the guinos to do it. I think we raised £350,000 in a short period of time, and that was in 1987. Was a big amount of money. But eventually the ground was sold to Brent Holmes for 850 grand, so we didn't really have a chance. The campaign went on for a couple of years. I think on board Planala initially blocked the plan permission, but it was overturned on appeal. Well, as I said, we tried everything. I remember going to, you seen during COVID we brought out the T-shirts and the one with the Cram badge, €1 and £1, sorry, at the time. We remember going to the game at Lansdowne. Ireland played Brazil at 87. We beat them 1-0. Liam Brady scored. And And we saw, like, loads went there and we saw badges outside the ground. And we had lots of people backing us. Like, we know a lot of Ireland fans are not really League of Ireland fans, but even there on that day, you could see so many people were supporting us, you know. So it's what, you know, it's what we did. We had vigils outside Milltown, overnight vigils outside Milltown, you know. And obviously, Louis Kilcoyne's house wasn't too far away in Milltown. And rumours have it that his 87D BMW, the locks were super glued, but I don't know. That's only that's a matter of suggestion.
Paddy Waters bringing up the chip.
Oh, Paddy Waters, another good man that was on the committee. Thank you. Paddy from Morelli's, yeah. He was on the supporters committee then. The man that was late for everything. I think he was late for his funeral as well. But as I said, we tried our best. We did everything. Ultimately, we lost in the end. We lost Milltown. I don't think we ever thought we'd be 22 years on the road, but it was devastating. When the news finally came through that, you know, all hope was gone, plan permission was given, and they were going to start the building, you know, it was tough. It was very, very tough, you know. But ultimately, we were powerless, you know. We were powerless to stop it. We tried and we tried, you know. But since that, the club has evolved, you know. We've had the members club, originally the forward club, helped take the club over. They helped us come out of administration or examinership. We fought off the GAA to make sure we got into talent because we had a say in the club and how it was run. We didn't have a say in how the club was run in 1987. So that's why I think it is vitally, vitally important that we always maintain and keep the 50% ownership of the club. So we will have a say in any future decisions of the club that we might not agree with, that go against, you know, the well-being of Shamrock Rovers. But, you know, that's basically it. And we tried, and as I said, I love Milltown. I was only going there regularly, as I said, for 4 years. But what we have at Talent now is special as well, really is special. You know, but we'll never, ever forget Milltown. Cheers, lads. Keep it